How do you turn a symbol of oppression into a beacon of freedom? Well, today, we're going to get into how one of America's most infamous prisons was reclaimed, sparking a revolution in the fight for Native American rights. This is the incredible story of how the Rock became the foundation for a whole new era.
For decades, Alcatraz Island, the Rock, was way more than just a prison. It was the end of the line. Surrounded by those treacherous waters in the San Francisco Bay, it was literally designed to crush the spirit of the nation's toughest criminals. A stark symbol of inescapable confinement. But then, in 1969, its entire identity got flipped on its head. Suddenly, the gates weren't holding people in. They were being held by people demanding to be let in, to their own future. This rock became the site of one of the single most important events in the Native American fight for civil rights.
And this was the powerful ultimatum laid down by Richard Oakes, one of the occupation's leaders. I mean, in an era that was already all about demanding civil rights, this was a direct challenge to the conscience of the entire nation. The message was crystal clear. This centuries of broken promises are over. It is time for real change.
So what exactly went down? In November of 1969, a group of Native American activists, who called themselves Indians of all tribes, sailed out to the prison island, which had recently been abandoned. They claimed the land, and they did it by citing a treaty that let Native Americans reclaim surplus federal land.
And listen, this wasn't just some weekend protest. They held that island for 19 months. That's more than a year and a half. This incredible, sustained act of defiance captured the nation's attention and showed just how determined they were. It proved this wasn't just a fleeting moment. This was the start of a movement.
The Alcatraz occupation was a huge catalyst for sure, but this fire had been building for generations. It was really the breaking point after centuries of broken promises and just plain destructive federal policies. To really get the impact, we have to look at the disastrous era that came right before it.
This was called the Termination Era, and its goal was honestly as brutal as it sounds. The idea was to systematically dismantle tribal sovereignty, dissolve reservations, and force native peoples to assimilate. It was basically a legislative attempt at cultural erasure, the latest in a long, devastating line of federal policies.
In this timeline, wow, it shows you just how direct the impact was. The occupation kicks off in '69, grabbing headlines and putting immense public pressure on the government. Just 1 year later, President Nixon is forced to publicly condemn that termination policy. And by 1975, all that pressure becomes law. The activism on the Rock directly reshaped national policy. So what did this new era of self-determination actually mean? Well, it was a radical shift in philosophy. Instead of the federal government paternalistically dictating every single aspect of life, tribes would finally have the authority to manage their own affairs, their schools, their healthcare, their communities.
And nowhere was this shift more critical than in education. For more than a century, the U.S. government had pretty much weaponized schools, using them as tools for cultural destruction. Self-determination offered a chance to take them back.
This slide really lays out the profound contrast at the heart of this change. On the left, you've got the old system, government-run boarding schools designed for one purpose: assimilation. Kids were punished for speaking their own language, their hair was cut, their identities stripped away. But on the right, you see the new model, run by the tribes themselves, which just turns that whole idea on its head. Schools became places of cultural revitalization and healing.
And this isn't just theory, right? This is happening. At Riverside Indian School, former students are now the teachers, actively working to undo the harm of the past. In Alaska, Yupik elders are helping connect math concepts to traditional knowledge, like using the geometry of a salmon rack. And at Rock Point on the Navajo Nation, kids are learning everything from math to grammar in their own language.
And get this, it gets results. A study found that students at Rock Point, who were taught in their native Navajo language, actually scored higher in math than their peers on other reservations who were taught only in English. I mean, that's powerful proof that embracing culture doesn't just preserve identity, it actively makes learning stronger.
This whole movement to protect and empower the next generation, well, it extended way beyond the classroom. The self-determination era also led to landmark legislation that was all about keeping Native families together.
Before 1978, a truly devastating crisis was unfolding in Native communities. As many as 1 in 3 Native children were being taken from their families, and most of them were placed in non-Native homes. The Indian Child Welfare Act was created to stop this cultural hemorrhaging. It mandates that the top priority has to be placing children with their own relatives or tribal members, ensuring they can grow up connected to their culture, which, by the way, studies show leads to far better outcomes.
But as powerful as this era has been, it's so important to understand that it wasn't a cure-all, not by a long shot. The path to true self-determination has been filled with some pretty significant challenges and setbacks.
Yeah, the new policies had some critical flaws. A lot of tribes whose federal recognition had been stripped away during that termination era were just left out. They couldn't access any of the new funding. On top of that, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the agency that was supposed to help, was riddled with corruption. A 1989 report exposed widespread fraud, showing that the problems ran deep, not just within the BIA, but inside some tribal governments too.
And that brings us to today. The work that started on Alcatraz over 50 years ago is far from over. The fight for sovereignty, for resources, and for justice, well, it's an ongoing, living movement.
This quote from Johnny Barup, one of the original occupiers, just captures the protest's enduring legacy perfectly. Alcatraz was the spark. It sent this powerful message all across the country. It's okay. You can stand up for your rights.
And that work just keeps growing. In the years since, amendments have given tribes more oversight over how funds are spent, and advocacy groups are pushing for things like better access to traditional foods. But the roots of the struggle, they run deep. Unrecognized treaties and unceded lands are still at the very heart of the fight for true sovereignty.
So the self-determination era was born from this incredible act of radical defiance on an island prison, and it fundamentally changed the course of history. As the fight for justice and sovereignty carries on, the question we're all left with is this: what's going to spark the next great shift in this ongoing story?